So there's no greater voice, there's no greater thought leader for our generation of Iraq, Afghanistan veterans than Kathy Roth-Douquet. So please give it up to Kathy.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here at the Military Influencers Conference. I have to admit that this is not a place in my youth I ever thought I might be. In fact, my first encounter with the military was as a Cold War-era college student. I was scaling a fence at a U.S. Army depot in upstate New York, protesting nuclear weapons. The soldiers on the other side of the fence were there to arrest me, and when I landed, that's what they promptly did. Needless to say, I felt no great kinship or connection to the American military at that point. However, several years later, due to a series of improbable events, I found myself marrying this dashing Marine Corps pilot. I assumed my new community would find me as foreign as I found them. But not so. They embraced me. And I quickly learned that one of the great gifts of service is the connection that it gives you to millions of Americans around the country. Shortly after I was married, for instance, I found myself in a broken down car on the side of a dark road in San Diego. And that can be a scary place for a young woman alone. But when the tow truck driver arrived, he had a Vietnam veteran patch on his jacket. "My husband's deployed," I said. And right away, we had an instant connection, an instant kinship. Several years later, I was a young lawyer dropping my daughter off at school on St. Helena Island in South Carolina. I stopped by a roadside tomato stand to buy some tomatoes from a Gullah Islander barefoot with a cap that said Marines. "My husband's a Marine," I said, and we fell to talking, and instant connection, instant kinship. And just recently, I was in Manhattan at a reception in a Park Avenue club, speaking to an older gentleman in a cashmere coat with a service insignia on his lapel. And he mentioned that he had been deployed to Germany after World War II. "My husband and I were served in Germany, were stationed in Germany a few years ago," we said. And again, instant connection, instant kinship. I've had dozens of experiences like this, as have many of you here in the room. And this is one of the things that made me grow to love the military community, this sense of family it gives you to people across the country. So I grew to love the military because I married a service member. But what about unconnected Americans? Why do they love the military? Or perhaps we should ask, do they? Do Americans, in fact, love the military? Maybe some of you here in this room have your doubts. My organization, Blue Star Families, has been polling active duty military spouses and veterans for many years. Our first year, in 2009, only 4% of respondents said they believed that the larger society understood or appreciated the sacrifices they made for the country. We've tracked this over time, and it has improved. This past year, 19% said they felt understood, 42% felt appreciated, and that's an improvement. But still, the majority feel that Americans as a whole don't understand or appreciate what we do for them. But it's important to note that there's a tension between this data and the data we get when we actually ask Americans about us. In this Pew study, more than 3/4 of Americans said that they felt members of the military contribute a lot to society. More than 8 other occupational groups, including doctors and teachers, clergy, journalists. In Gallup surveys, Americans routinely say that the military is among the most competent and ethical of professions. And the American public as a whole proves their commitment to us through the most generous set of taxpayer-funded benefits of any country, anywhere in the world, for its veterans. So they don't understand us, but they love us. So if it's not for what we do, then what is it that they love us for? Before I answer that question, or give you my version of what I think the answer is, I'd like to tell you a story. And it's one that was told to me by a friend of mine, many of you may know, Mike Monroe, a veteran. He told it to me shortly after he moved to Bethesda, Maryland, just up the road. It was July 4th, and he wanted to take his kids to the Independence Day parade. And so he walked out of his door with his kids, and he met up with his neighbors who were also walking out of their doors. He believed that the parade was in the center of town. And they all started walking together, meeting up with other folks. And at the side of the road, there were people handing out little American flags, and he took one as did his kids. And it was a pretty festive scene, everyone walking along, waving those flags, until they got to the center of town, where they didn't stop, but just kept going. So Mike turned to the guy next to him, and he said, "Where does the parade start?" And the guy looked back at him, and he said, "This is the parade." And I loved that. In Mike's town, the parade was everyone walking together. And I think that's the vision of what we want America to be. All of us marching together in this great democratic experiment. The parade isn't something you watch, it's something you do, it's something you participate in. We're all tied to the march and to each other. But to a lot of people in America today, it doesn't feel like a parade. We're living in a lonely and polarized town, marked by deep divisions and people bowling alone. America is less like this, maybe more like that, or that. According to a recent NBC Wall Street Journal poll, 8 out of 10 Americans believe that the country is mainly or totally divided. And these findings are remarkably consistent across ages, demographics, political ideologies. And I don't think that's what we want to be as a country. And this brings us back to what Americans see in us. Because despite the fact that we are diverse, the military community, more or less as diverse as a larger country, we're not divided. Why not? In this age of identity politics, I think it's important to recognize that the identity one gets from being in the military is different from other kinds of identities. It's different from race or class or sexual orientation, political ideology. It's an identity that you get from an oath, from a commitment that eventually leads to a commitment to country, to freedom and democracy, to other people. This is an oath that is so solemn that it transforms people's identity. There is a name for words like this, words that are so formal and so serious that they are like acts. That term is performative speech. These are words that change reality. The classic example of performative speech are the marriage vows. When a person says, "I do," to the question, do you take this man? Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, your lawfully wedded husband? That person is transformed from a lone individual to a member of a family. In many traditions, they enter a sanctified union. I do solemnly swear to support and defend the United States Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. This transforms a person from however they identified themselves before into a member of the armed forces. It makes them, and by extension their family, a member of the larger military family. The oath goes on. It asks people to pledge true faith and allegiance to the United States Constitution, not to a flag, not to a president or a commanding officer, but to a set of ideals and rules for a fair and just society. And because we honor that oath, we honor the other people who make that oath as well. That commitment we make creates kinship. Speaking of the Constitution itself is performative speech. It's words that changed reality. The Constitution transformed subjects of a foreign sovereign into free citizens who provided for themselves and each other safety, well-being, hope. Today, soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and coasties together dedicate their lives to protecting these fundamental principles of our nation. And as such, in many ways, they're the ultimate citizens. So I think this starts to get to what America loves about the military. I think America sees in the military people who, despite their divisions, despite their differences, I should say, are able to work together, committed and able to forge a more perfect union. Because of that oath that men and women make, and because of the excellent training that goes along with it, a heterogeneous group of people is able to become highly functional, competent, and united. And today, that can seem pretty aspirational, even inspirational, something we need right now. Does that mean that people in the military don't have conflict with each other, don't have different opinions or identities? Of course not. I think of Craig Hume and Jim Bowes, two sailors, one a black liberal, the other a white conservative, According to Bose, the two of them are polar opposites on every idea, on every political issue. The guy drives me crazy, Bose said. But Bose also nominated Hume to be Navy Service Member of the Year because he said Hume inspired him, and he couldn't imagine anyone who deserved it more. And Hume actually won that award. And I think that's great. I think that's the kind of country we want to be, where despite our differences, we can appreciate each other. We should make sure we should become the kind of country where whatever our differences or identities, they don't trump our identity as United States citizen, and they don't interfere with our ability to appreciate each other. When people look at the United States military, I think they see a model for what that can be and how that can work. My organization, Blue Star Families, wants to welcome everyone into the military family, civilian neighbors included. We think they have as much to gain by interacting with us as we have to gain by interacting with them. Certainly, we should ask our civilian neighbors to understand who we are and what we actually do for the country. That's fair. But we should also understand what's valuable to them about us. We have the opportunity to continue modeling for them what citizenship can be, what a model of a functioning society can be. We can welcome them into the parade. I think this is what our country needs from us most right now, in some ways. And we have always proven to be people who are willing to serve.